Barbara. Barbara's one of Aunt Edith's girls, the oldest one that's still living. She was our hostess on Sunday afternoon for the Sunday afternoon gathering and visit and dinner, and it was a dinner worthy of an Aunt Edith type spread. There was a little bit of everything that you could think of that you ought to find in a Southern family pitch-in. Barbara was the hostess, and the very first thing that happened when we got to Barbara's for dinner, and our timing was pretty good. We got there, they had just begun to fill their plates for dinner. Dub and Donnie and Glenn already had theirs full and were out there at in the garage at a table there, and we walked past them and walked in, and the others were filling their plates. And the very first thing that I saw in there blessed me. It reminded me of a story that my mother told. I don't know. Just another one of them stories she loved to tell, because most of the stories that she loved to tell, she was either aggravated at somebody or something, and she just liked repeating it. The story was this: when you eat dinner at a family gathering in Arkansas, a situation where all the men get their plates, get in line, fill their plates, sit down and eat, and the women stand back and make sure that the men are happy and they got everything they need before they fill their plates and eat. That just bugged my mom fiercely. She could not stand that. She thought that was awful. Well, and that was kind of an Arkansas thing, and I don't know where it stemmed from. Some kind of a Southern tradition, or some kind of the men, you feed the men and then they can get back to work, or what. Sometimes maybe there wasn't enough food and you want to make sure that the breadwinners got the bread before anybody else did. I don't know where the thing came from, but it was an observable occurrence. Basically in Aunt Edith's, every time we had one of those kind of dinners at her place, and that's where we usually had them, you could observe that thing happening, and it aggravated my mother, and she's told anybody that would listen about it. Well, we walked into Barbara's, and I already said we passed Donnie and Dub and his two boys and son-in-law and Glenn. They were already seated at the table eating. We walked in there, and there stood Margaret Ann, Barbara, Eileen, Glenda, and Rhonda. There they all stood, back against the wall, with their arms crossed, watching what was going on, not even making any kind of attempt to go feed themselves until everybody else gone through that line. Now, were all the women doing that? Nope. That group I just mentioned, which I'm going to call old school Arkansas, those women weren't about to touch an eating utensil or fill a plate for themselves until, in this case, their other guests had the opportunity to fill theirs. The rule that aggravated my mother wasn't in existence because there were some younger people who may have been related to Aunt Edith, but maybe weren't old enough to have been to have known her intimately like the rest of us did. There were some young ladies in line filling their plate, and right at the front of the young ladies were some of the California young ladies, and of course California's not Arkansas. California, and I don't know where this has anything to do with it or not, California is a much more liberal place than Arkansas, and women don't have to stand in line and wait for men on anything in California, and they dang sure didn't at this meal. But that situation, there it was. Aunt Edith's children and grandchildren who were under the tutorage of Aunt Edith, they were standing back there waiting for everybody else to get their food. And the other ladies, and of course the women in my family knew that rule too, because they'd heard it they'd heard it secondhand from my mom. They hadn't necessarily experienced it. Betty had, but I don't know whether my three girls had experienced it or noticed that they were experiencing it. But Betty knew all about that rule, and she knew all about how it aggravated Mom. And there it was in living color when we walked in, and I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Nevertheless, the girls did a great job of preparing the dinner and seeing to it that everybody was happy and able to visit and fellowship, and we had a great time at Barbara's that afternoon. While we were there, talk about some other things. I met some people that I think some of them I'd met before, but some of them I hadn't. Larry's daughter-in-law, I'm not sure I'd ever met her. I'd met Bruce, his son, 2 or 3 times, but I don't think the rest of that family I'd met. But I met his daughter-in-law and one of his granddaughters at this luncheon, and they were delightful young people. Blessed me to meet them. Lynn's boys, one of Lynn's boys, Lynn's oldest son, and I'm going to say Greg. I'm not sure that's right now. I hope it is. Doesn't matter. I've already said it. Lynn's boy. I met him, his wife, and I want to say children, but I'm not sure there was anybody there but the son, and his name was Grant. And I had a discussion with them, enjoyed that. I'd met Grant over at Glenn's the night before. I didn't know how he fit in. I knew he was one of the grandkids of somebody, but I didn't know which ones. But turns out he was Lynn Smith's grandson. And he was a turkey hunter, and we had some discussions about turkey hunting and quail hunting and other kinds of hunting. So just another part of the blessing of having made this visit, and just so glad that I came and had these opportunities. Eileen has the picture that I painted of Uncle Marvin and Aunt Edith's house, and she brought it to the dinner at Barbara's for everybody to see and appreciate. And when I painted that picture and sent it to Aunt Edith, I wrote a letter and sent it with it. And that letter basically says that so many of my memories of Arkansas and people in Arkansas are centered around that house and the geography and the buildings that surrounded that house. The road, Presale Slough, and the smokehouse, and the storm cellar, and the barn, and the old H tractor that sit out by the outhouse, and later the M diesel that sit there too. And how that house represented Arkansas in my childhood to me in my memories. And Eileen made a copy of that letter for me and each of my children and brought it along as well. I so much appreciate that. I'd actually forgotten all about the letter, but I hadn't forgotten the picture of the house. So thank you, Eileen, for that. And we had the dinner at Barbara's house, and late in the day I was standing in the kitchen area and looking into the living room area, and there's a large raised ceiling in that part of Barbara's house, and you're probably looking at a picture maybe inside the house at that raised ceiling area, or from outside the house at Barbara's beautiful house that she lives in there in Lake City. I commented to Barbara, I said, that old house that you guys were raised in, it might fit in this room, this living area of your now house with your home in Lake City. The house you and all those kids were raised in might actually fit inside this room. She said, oh no, you remember that house is a little bit different than it actually was. It wouldn't fit in there. But I'm still not sure I know if you took the front porch off and the back, that lean-to back porch off, the rest of that house would fit in that room. And I don't know, just another example of those Smith children and their upbringing and their work ethic and their sense of duty and responsibility, and the people that they are. That house that Barbara lives in is just another example of that. Local girl does good. On the way home, we stopped at Lambert's restaurant in Sikeston, Missouri. If you don't know anything about Lambert's restaurant, they're advertised on the internet as the home of the throwed roll. And what that means is that among other things that go on in that restaurant, there's a waiter that goes around with fresh, hot yeast rolls in a big basket, and he's holding them up. Said, anybody want a roll? A roll. And people in the restaurant, big full place, if they want a roll, they hold their hand up. Well, when they hold their hand up, he takes a roll and he throws it to them wherever they are. They might be right here, they might be over about 30, 40, 50 feet. He throws them a roll. And the guys that do that, I don't know where they get those guys, but they've all got a good arm on them. Not only do they have a good arm, they're accurate. They throw that roll and they hit you right in the chest with it. You need to be ready to catch it. Well, one time when we were going to Arkansas or coming home, I don't remember which, but Dad and his second wife were with us, and we stopped there. We stopped at Lambert's. I'd been there before, and I knew what was going on. Dad had never been there, and we stopped there to eat, and they have good home-cooked food. And they bring you free samples around to the table the whole time you're there. You can't stop there without getting it's a mistake to stop there on the way home. You need to stop there on the way down there because your driving's about over. If you stop there on the way home, you get full, you eat too much, you're miserable all the way home. That's what happened to me this time. But back to the story. We stopped there with Dad one time, and the guy come around with the rolls, and Dad said, yeah, and held up his hand. The guy threw the roll at him. Another thing I didn't tell you about is their drinks. They bring you a drink in a container that's about, 15 inches tall and about that big around, and it's about, whether it's not a gallon probably, but it's close. Between a half gallon and a gallon, they bring your drinks in. And Dad had sweet tea. He had a big old drink sitting in front of him there, sweet tea in that great big tall glass. This guy threw that roll at him, and it so startled him that he threw his hands up and he knocked his tea over and spilled it all over everything. That run off the table in his lap. And if you know anything about Hollis Mooneyham, you knew when something like that happened to him and it was unexpected, he might fly mad. He was aggravated. That guy, he started flustering and carrying on and trying to get up, and he was going to go get that guy for what he considered that guy spilled his tea. He actually knocked his tea over himself, but that's what I had to physically restrain Dad and explain to him about the whole deal about throwing the rolls and all that. Get him calmed down to keep him from confronting that guy about throwing that roll at him. So we stopped there on the way home, and like I've already said, I ate too much. I was miserable from there on. Brett drove from there up into up 57 to where it intersects with 64 going across. She drove and I napped, and I'm glad she did, because I was when we left there I was miserable, and I kind of got over it while I was napping. So we got home safe and sound, had a good visit, tried to share as much of it as I could with you. I'm a hard times guy. Have a good day.